Hey guys, my name is Gabby, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be filming my August wrap-up. It's already the end of August. What the fuck? In the month of August, I read a total of 9 books. Yeah, let's just jump right into it. So the first book I read this month was It by Stephen King, 1,153 pages, and it is officially the longest book I have ever read. This is the second Stephen King book I have ever read, the first one being The Shining that I read 2 years ago. I really enjoyed this book. I mean, it was definitely a challenge, but I was able to read this entire book in 5 days. This book follows these kids who are living in Derry, Maine, and they are experiencing this clown named Pennywise that's like following them everywhere. And it takes place half when they're kids, and then it also takes place when they're adults, like 27 years later. And so I thought the first like 200 pages of this book were really slow because it was when they were adults and they were all just like getting called back to Derry, and it was very like repetitive and slow. But then once it goes to like the part with the kids, it starts to definitely pick up. And throughout this entire book, I definitely enjoyed the parts with the kids a lot more than I enjoyed the parts with the adults. I will say that the ending of this book was very like anticlimactic, and I didn't really love the last like 100 pages or so. I just thought that they were very like, for a book that was this intense, it was kind of like a disappointment at the very end, and there was some stuff that happened at the very end that I don't think was necessary. Stephen King is such a freaking amazing writer. Like the way that it flashes back and forth between the kids and the adults, like it'll be flashing back like mid-sentence and he'll be able to like flash it back to like the kids, and I just think his writing is so good. It's like watching a scary movie and it like cuts off in the middle of the scene and goes back into a flashback, but he's able to write it so well. Like, I was just so amazed. I found the interludes to be really boring, and I mainly skimmed or sometimes I even skipped them altogether because I didn't think they were very relevant to the story as a whole, and they were so boring and so long, and there was 5 of them. Ugh. I loved every single scene with Pennywise the clown. I just thought it was so creepy, and I loved all the kids in this book. I cannot wait to see the movie adaptation. I really, really hope they do it justice, and yeah, I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. The second book I read this month was Hothead by Damon Suede. This is a male-male romance that follows 2 firemen in New York City who both happen to work on 9/11. Names are Dante and Griffin, and they're both best friends and they work at the same fire station. Griffin is secretly crushing on Dante throughout this entire book, and he doesn't know if Dante feels the same way about him. And the main storyline happening in this book is that Dante wants to do online porn because he is going to like lose his house and he like really needs the money. This book was like really good. I've been wanting to read it for a really long time because everybody talks a lot about this book and like hypes it up and stuff, and I thought it was really good, but for me it was just missing that like wow factor that I really like look for in a romance novel. I did love Griffin and Dante as characters, but I do think they could have been a little bit more well developed, and I found it kind of hard to believe that they didn't know they had feelings for each other. Like, it took them so long to figure it out, and it was like all the time in Griffin's like inner thoughts, he's like, oh my god, he's only doing this because whatever, like he doesn't really like me. Like, it was just like, wake up. But I think that their first kiss in their locker room totally made the entire book worth it. I ended up giving this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't my favorite, but I liked it. It was, you know, it was good. The third book I read this month was Stillhouse Lake by Rachel Caine. This is a mystery thriller that follows this woman who's on the run after she discovers that her husband is a serial killer. Her husband gets like convicted and goes to jail, and they still like suspect that she knew about it all along and stuff, so she takes her kids and like leaves the town, and she's like on the run, and she's always trying to hide and stay anonymous because all these people online think that she's guilty and that the kids are guilty, and they like want to kill them. I think the prologue of this book is so good, and it automatically hooks you and intrigues you right away. The writing was really like repetitive in this book up until like the halfway point, and then it finally like picks up and starts getting really good towards the end. I was questioning like every single person towards the end. I had no idea who was the one that was like sabotaging her, and like, oh my god, it was just so intense. And also, I just really love Sam Cade's character. Like, I loved him. But yeah, this was a really good, really intense thriller. Highly recommend it. I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. I mean, the ending did get a little bit unrealistic and too dramatic for my taste, but it was still pretty good and I would still recommend it. Fourth book I read this month was Beautiful Mistake by V. Keeland. It follows a professor named Kane West and his new TA, Rachel. I love student-teacher relationships, like y'all probably know this by now. I have a weakness for them. I don't know what it is, I just really love them, so this book definitely had that for me. I really love the way like music connected these two because he's like he teaches music as a professor, and you find out about his past, and he used to be in this band. She is a TA for his music class, and so she's pursuing music as well, and I just really love the way that music connected these two characters. I think their chemistry was like off the charts amazing, like I was shipping it so hard. However, I didn't really care for the unexpected like religious aspect in this book. Like out of nowhere it started to get very religious, especially towards the end, and it was just like really unexpected because it didn't feel like that in the beginning, like it was gonna be like a very religious type of book, but I just feel like towards the end it got a little bit too religious for me. I just didn't really like that much. This one was still good, it just wasn't as good, so I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. But like Kanye West though, he's pretty perfect. Oh my god. The 5th book I read this month was Illegal Contact by Santino Hassel. This is a new August release, and it is a male-male romance that follows Gavin Brawley, who's an NFL player who's under house arrest for the next 6 months, and he hires a personal assistant named Noah to like take care of his like groceries and things that he can't like leave the house for. Like he's literally gonna be under house arrest for the next 6 months. So Noah is like very openly gay, and he like used to work at like an LGBT community center and that type of thing, and Gavin is a closeted bisexual because of his career as an NFL player. Like he doesn't, all of his like management and whatever thinks that he should keep it like closeted because they don't want it to like ruin his career potentially. So he's a closeted bisexual, and so oh my god you guys, I freaking shipped Noah and Gavin so freaking hard. Like oh my god, the tension between them is so real, and they're both very sassy, and they both have that like alpha male thing going on. I was like swooning this whole book, and it's like I love how sassy they both are, but at the same time Noah is like so thoughtful and sensitive on the inside. Like the things that he does for Gavin sometimes is just so sweet, and I was like dying of their cuteness. They were just so cute. Really love Noah's relationship with his dad, and how his dad is going through this like stage of unemployment, and he's just trying to help out his dad. And this is definitely a slow burn romance in like a really good way. Like it takes a long time for anything to happen between these two, but it's definitely building so much tension to the point where when it finally happens you're just like yes, finally. It's so good in that way, and like their first kiss scene was like so cute. So definitely loved this book. I ended up giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was probably my favorite book of the month, and I love these two together. I cannot wait for the sequel, and this was my first football romance that I've ever read, and I really freaking enjoyed it. So definitely check this one out. The 6th book I read this month was Mudvayne by Tarryn Fisher. Can I just say, Tarryn Fisher is like literally one of my new favorite authors. Like this is the 3rd book that I read from her in the past like 3 months. Holy shit, it's like she gets better with every book I read from her. This book follows an author named Senna who is being held captive in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. This book is definitely one of the darkest books I think I've ever read. I mean, there is like trigger warnings for depression, rape, drugs, schizophrenia, probably anything you could imagine is in this book. It's very dark, very like disturbing, and it's sad as hell. So Senna has one of the most unfortunate stories and unlucky stories that I've ever read, I think, in my life. Like as far as the way her life goes, and like her luck in life is very terrible, and she's extremely depressed at times because of how unfortunate her life is, and so it definitely made this book hard to read at times when you're reading from the perspective of a very, very depressed character. Tarryn Fisher's writing is so unique and different and so beautiful, and I love her writing. I loved Isaac's character. He was just so amazing and sweet to her, and I just like, I loved him. After I read this book, I felt so like emotionally drained for like days after. Like I was just thinking about this book constantly, and it really like haunted me, you know. Like this book is very like hauntingly beautiful, and it's definitely one that stays on your mind for a long time. So I ended up giving this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was also one of my favorite books I read this month. The 7th book I read this month was Wish You Were Here by Renee Carlino. This is her new release that just came out this month. Renee Carlino is one of my favorite authors. If you don't know, like Before We Were Strangers is one of my favorite books of all time. This book follows a waitress in LA named Charlotte who spends one night with this guy named Adam, and she falls for him, and Adam is a lawyer who recently quit his job to paint full-time. So then 7 months later, she hasn't heard from him, and she starts dating this new guy named Seth, but she's still hung up on Adam. Freaking hated this book. Like, hated it, like 1 star, hated it. I think I was really surprised by that because Renee Carlino is one of my favorite authors ever, and I was never expecting to give her book 1 star ever. I could not deal with this book. Charlotte as a main character is probably one of the most obnoxious, judgmental, selfish main characters I've ever read about in my entire life. I couldn't stand her. She was constantly bitching about everything. Like, she judges people for being dog people instead of cat people. Like, who doesn't like dogs? Adam and Charlotte's first night together when you're supposed to be like getting all the feels for them was ridiculous and like cringeworthy, and like, they were acting like they've known each other their whole lives, and like he was throwing up all these red flags and being so weird and creepy, and she was just like, well, maybe that's just part of his charm. Like, no, he's weird, he's creepy, get out of there, you don't even know him. It was ridiculous, and Seth deserves way better. Like, Charlotte is hung up on this guy that she spent 1 night with 7 months ago, and the way she like treats Seth is just fucking ridiculous. Like, she's such a bitch to him, she gives him so much attitude, and she always acts like he's not good enough for her, and I just, oh my god, like, Seth deserves so much better than Charlotte and her bullshit. This was one of my most highly anticipated books of the year, and I love Renee Carlino, so I was so fucking disappointed by this book. Once you finally realize why Adam has been ignoring her this whole time and like why he was acting so weird, it's like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, she's really trying to go for that? Like, no, I was just, by that point I was so done, and I skimmed to the end, and the ending is ridiculous, like absolutely ridiculous. So I did not enjoy this one. I ended up giving it 1 star. One of the most disappointing books of the year, definitely. 8th book I read this month was Goodbye Paradise by Sarina Bowen. Follows these 2 boys named Josh and Caleb who live in this religious compound that's like a cult in Wyoming. They are far from society, like they have never watched TV, they've never eaten fast food, and they don't like understand basic things in society because they've basically been held against their will in this religious compound their whole lives. So they finally escape the compound, and they're both like 19 and 20 years old, I believe. They make their way across the country together. They're trying to get to Massachusetts. So this story was really cute, but I didn't like love it as much. I know this is shocking, but I didn't really care for how religious this book was, and I know it's like, it's obvious that it's like religious, like I should have been aware of that, but they were just like, oh my god, we're sinning, like we can't do this in front of God, and like there was a lot of that in this. But their romance went from like 0 to 100. It was like, it's all told from Josh's perspective in the beginning, so it's like Josh is like crushing on Caleb for his like entire life, and he never knows if he feels the same, and then like as soon as they're out of the compound, Caleb's just like, of course silly, I've loved you my whole life, and it's just like, oh okay, and they're just like together, and there's no more tension, no more build up, then they're just a couple. I was kind of disappointed by that. I wanted a little bit more tension and build up and uncertainty about like whether they felt the same about each other, you know, and I just thought that this was a cute romance, but it was forgettable, and so I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. The last book I read this month was Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire, and this is like a young adult fantasy novel that follows these kids who have disappeared from the real world and find themselves in Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children. I've been wanting to read this book for a really long time, and fantasy isn't really my jam. Like, I don't really read a lot of fantasy, obviously, so I didn't really care for the fantasy aspect of this book, but the best thing about this book is easily the diversity. This book follows a main character who's asexual, and one of the other main characters is a transgender, so that was definitely something I didn't expect, and I was really appreciative of the representation in this book. But as far as the storyline goes, I wasn't like super interested in what was going on, and I thought the whole like murder mystery plot kind of came out of nowhere. But I do think that the message that this book is trying to send about, you know, finding a world in which you are accepted for who you are, I mean, I think that that's really powerful and really important, and I appreciate that this book talks about that, but I wasn't a huge fan of the actual story that was happening. So I ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. It was really good, but it wasn't like my favorite. And those are all the books that I read this month. What was your favorite book of the month, and how many books did you read this month? What was your most disappointing? No doubt my most disappointing was Wish You Were Here by Renee Carlino. I can't even believe how ridiculous that book was, and I'm so disappointed by it. And I think by far my favorites were Illegal Contact and Mudvayne. Those just like blew me away, and I loved them so much. But yeah, let me know in the comments what were your favorites. Thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I will see you guys next time. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks. I've been feeling it since 1966.